Saat Farkı'ndan merhabalar. Her hafta farklı milletlerden, farklı ülkelerden konuklarla gündeme dair konulara farklı perspektiflerden bakmaya çalışıyoruz. Farklı milletlerin perspektiflerinden yaklaşmaya çalışıyoruz. Bu hafta Çek Cumhuriyeti'nden bir konuğum var. İstanbul'da kendisi şu anda. Ayağının tozuyla Kanalına geldi. Gelmişken kanalımızı da ziyaret etti ve gelmişken burada kendisiyle bir röportaj gerçekleştireceğiz. Biraz Avrupa Birliği konuşacağız. Kendisi aynı zamanda bir gazeteci, Orta Doğu'da çalışmalar yapan, şu anda da Prag Metropolitan Üniversitesi'nde dersler veren, aynı zamanda saha deneyimi olan, çünkü Orta Doğu'da saha deneyimi olan bir gazeteci ve akademisyen diyelim. Bretislav Turecek bizlerle. Hoş geldiniz. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Welcome to Turkey, welcome to Istanbul, and welcome to our channel.
Thanks a lot.
So, Mr. Bretislav, you have a very interesting personal background. You have been interested in the Middle East. You spent some 6 years as a Czech radio correspondent in Jerusalem, in Kudus, and you traveled all around the region, I think, from Afghanistan to Iran to Iraq. And now you're a lecturer at Prague Metropolitan University, so you have experience on the field also. So could you please tell us about yourself a little bit first, and then we will talk more about the Middle East from a Czech point of view.
Well, to make it brief, in early 1990s, Czechoslovakia was not a communist country anymore. We were free to travel. And once I graduated from a university, unlike many other people who traveled to the West, I decided to travel to East. And that's my habit since then. So I haven't visited many West European countries. But as you said, Feyza, I spent a lot of time in Iran, in Israel, Palestine, even Afghanistan or Pakistan, because I found there a lot of interesting politics. I found a lot of many interesting cultural features. And also I found that it's a good topic to cover as a journalist. That's how I got to journalism. So, and I'm in the field I've been for almost 30 years.
Wow, very interesting. So, Mr. Bretislav, I also wonder, how is the general interest for the Middle Eastern issues in your country?
Well, most of the Czech audience, I would say, is scared of Middle East. We see it as a troublemaking region. Full of conflicts, full of wars, and generating refugee waves. Mm-hmm. This is, fortunately or unfortunately, how most of Czech people see it. And then, of course, hopefully, there are people who are interested more deeper in what is happening here. There are even people, of course, who know that we also share a sort of responsibility for what is happening here. For example, most of the Czech politicians support Israel regardless of consequences of Israeli behavior on the occupied territories. Basically, in some sense, we are like a football match watchers. We support them and we are not asking why. We should support them. So that's a bit different from many Western countries where people are educated, where they know more deeper what is happening here and they are interested in that and they know it's not just black and white and there are many shades of gray in between.
I see. So I was going to come to Israel in specific because when during my research about the subject, I found this interesting. There's a very unique position of all Czech governments. They are supporting forcefully whatever the Israeli policy is, in sharp contrast with the prevailing EU position. So why is that, first of all? How is that position? Could you please explain?
You know, during communist time, most of the time, a period of several decades, the Czech Republic was a satellite, or Czechoslovakia, was a satellite of Soviet Union. And based on that, we had to ally ourselves with many Arab countries or regimes like Libya, Syria, Iraq, against Israel. And once communism was over, the public mood completely changed. And we said, we are fed up with all these Arab dictatorships. Now we should support democracy in the Middle East. And the only island of democracy in the Middle East is Israel. I remember in early 90s, there were even people wearing a Jewish star without being Jews. it was just, even it was a part of the fashion, you know. So this is the prevailing mood. And now, for example, many people in Prague would tell you that Israel is a barrier against expansion of Muslims. We have to support Israel because if there is no Israel in the Middle East, then Muslims will invade us, their Islam will spread on our expenses. So this is, if you would go to a pub, if you would speak to ordinary people, ordinary voters, you would get to such points, to put it very briefly. And then if we talk about politicians, for example, in 2012, there was a UN General Assembly voting whether to accept Palestinian state as an observer state. And there were about 8 countries which were against it. Of course, it was Israel, but there was an only European country voting against Palestinians, and it was Czech Republic. Wow. So we didn't abstain, we didn't support Palestinians, but we were openly and explicitly against them. So this is the prevailing long-term position of the Czech Republic.
I see. How is the general government view, or let's say reaction, for example, recent developments? Because, you know, we don't really follow Czech issues, domestic or foreign issues in Turkish media a lot. So while you are here, I would love to I would love to learn more about that. For example, when it comes to Syria, Syrian war, when it comes to recent Afghanistan, US withdrawal from Afghanistan, how is the general common sense there?
Case to case. For example, when you mention Syria, we have a very unique position. We have a very strong Czech ambassador in Syria. By the way, before Mrs. Philippi, she was ambassador in Turkey, in Ankara. She was also in Baghdad. She was also in Lebanon. So she knows the region very well. And through all the war or conflict in Syria, she's based there. And I hope I'm not mistaken. Now the Czech Republic is the only EU country which has a full-fledged embassy in Damascus. And we, by the way, we also take care of US diplomatic interests in the country. For example, when there was necessary to extract, to save some of the American hostages, it was negotiated through the Czech embassy. So while many people and many politicians are strongly against the government of Bashar Assad, in the same time we have the embassy there. So there is an internal discussion. Should we keep the embassy over there? Embassy so close allied with Bashar Assad, the bloody dictator. This is how the discussion goes.
I see. What about Afghanistan?
And yes, we were very strong allies of Afghanistan, of the government, I mean, of US policy over there. Many Czech politicians from left to right, they said, we have to wage this war in Afghanistan because below Hindu Kush, we are fighting for Prague. We are defending Prague over there. And they have been saying so for many years, for almost 20 years. But then, of course, suddenly when Donald Trump decided to withdraw, these people, you know, what could they say? Our interest to defend Prague also stopped when Washington decided to go away. So yes, now there is a soul searching whether it was wise enough to go there, to spend so much money. Also, 14 Czech soldiers were killed in Afghanistan, not as many as the other countries, of course. But still, now the question after this Afghan experience, the question is, should we next time also so blindly follow our allies in their maybe not well-based enough military campaigns abroad? For example, now we have a military unit in Mali, in north of Africa. So is it good to stay there with the French or not? Interesting.
Where does Turkey stand, by the way? I mean, you know, Turkey is also part of the Middle East historically. And also it wants to be a part of European Union as well. So where does Turkey stand from your point of view?
Not my personal point of view, but if you would ask people, they are quite critical of Turkey because, for example, they see the government of Turkey as someone who is using its power, like, for example, preventing immigrants coming to Europe, but your government let us to pay for it. So we take it like something, negative. When I have to explain this to audience in my articles, so I say, so should the Turks do it for free? They have more than 4 million refugees alone, and we are scared of 1 million in entire Europe. So yes, there is a chance, of course, to offer another perspective, and many politicians are aware of that we need Turkey, while it is a country which is not on our side. For example, I would say if there is today a sort of referendum whether Turkey should be accepted to EU, definitely most of the Czech people would be against it.
Yeah, for sure. Like the rest of the Europeans, I think.
Probably.
Yeah. Mr. Bretislav, then let's talk about the recent parliamentary elections, because you recently had elections and it changed the course after, I think, 8 years in the country. So the opposition has won a surprise majority, they say, the Western media outlets say. Was it a surprise, really?
The supporters of opposition would tell you it's no surprise at all. Finally, the things are going well. The point is that until now, for 8 years, we had Mr. Babiš, Andrej Babiš, as a prime minister, and there was a clash of conflict of interest between his personal, huge business enterprise, while he was, or Czech government and his companies were receiving money from EU. So the question was, how is it that the prime minister of EU member state is receiving money for his own private companies from EU? So that was one of major points of the opposition against Mr. Babiš. Then, of course, he was accused, together with our president, Mr. Miloš Zeman, that they are rather pro-Eastern, pro-Russian, pro-Chinese against the interest of EU and United States, while we, the Czech Republic, should strongly belong to the Western camp. So some politicians, I would say, overplayed this card of our identity. Where do we belong to? To the post-Soviet bloc or rather to the West? And it became also a part of the recent elections. Mm-hmm. And then Mr. Babiš, well, he is not able to build a coalition. It's clear, because the opposition parties have a slight majority in the parliament of 200 members, okay? But still, his party, which is called ANO, won the most seats in the parliament, 72, while the others, the anti-Babiš, let's say anti-Babiš, anti-prime minister coalition got just 71. But altogether they are stronger. So now in these days we will see a lot of negotiations. Then there is a question of our president, Mr. Miloš Zeman, because he's in a very dire health situation right now. So it also depends whether he will be, and to what extent he will be able to take part and take his responsibilities and his actually constitutional duties in building the new government.
Interesting. So you also mentioned, and I want to talk more about identity. It was interesting also that you mentioned where do we belong to. I mean, we will talk about that more, but in terms of European Union, I think next year you will be the president country of the Union. So let's talk more about the Union then, especially after Brexit. There are fears that other countries, or other European countries, might follow suit as well. And there are some discussions in Poland, and I think there are some discussions in your country too. And according to some polls, I took note, Czechs don't have a great affinity for the European Union. In fact, they are among the most skeptical of the bloc. Is it so, really? And how is the general...
Probably. But still, then people get to a common sense, I would say. There is, for example, one party which is also part of the new parliament. We have just 4 parties in the new parliament after the recent elections. And one of those parties, it will definitely be in opposition, is calling for a referendum about our membership, and implicitly they are against our membership, I would say. But still, they are not relevant enough, I would say, because then even those skeptical right-wing politicians, they are aware that we need EU, we belong there. Now we see Brexit, we see the consequences of Brexit, which are not anything bright, I would say, when we see what happens in UK. And our politicians are aware of that. So there is really no serious discussion about leaving EU, about some Czechzit or whatever.
Czechzit, yeah, I like that. What are the arguments for those who are against the bloc? I mean,
well, that's a good question. Mostly it's not about economy, it's rather about culture. Those people who don't like EU, they mostly criticize its tendency to teach us how to behave, what law should we have, how should we behave towards minorities, how should we behave towards refugees or migrants. For example, 5 years ago, when there was this huge wave of migrants, 1 million people within 1 year coming to Europe through Turkey mostly, the question went like how the Brussels or EU can force us to accept those people. We don't want them. And anyway, if we use this quota system, which was proposed then, and bring some of them from, let's say, Italy to Czech Republic, they don't want to stay in Czech Republic anyway. Sooner or later, they will move westward to Germany, to Sweden, to France. So don't force us to this. And this is, I think, this is the major point of those who criticize EU. Don't force upon us something that is going against our own interests.
I see. Interesting. So you don't see that kind of strong possibility that, for a referendum to exit?
No, I don't think so. Not at all.
It's not that strong. I mean, the common sense is not that strong.
Definitely not. And even so, I think even if there would be a referendum, even people who are now, producing and spreading their objections on Facebook and in media, then they would change their mind, I'm sure, if we would have to decide yes or no. We are saying yes, but. But then in referendum, there are no buts, yes or no.
Yeah, I see. So you also touched upon, and of course it's one of the most critical and sensitive issues for all European countries, which is migration, of course. So let's talk about migration and immigration. How many refugees, by the way, you have in your country now? 1 million, you said, overall, total?
No,
in all Europe, you said 1 million.
Europe,
in Czech Republic,
in Czech Republic,
specific?
we accept few hundreds a year, and most of them actually are asylum seekers not from Middle East, from Muslim countries, let's say, but from post-Soviet countries, for example,
I see.
and so on. So we have a strong number of people from Ukraine who are like migrant workers in our country, on some long-term residents, for example. In past, in 1990s, we had few thousand refugees from Bosnia, from the war. These were the Bosnian Muslims, but it was just on a permanent basis. After the war finished, most of them returned back. Some of them stayed behind, they got Czech citizenship. But now, indeed, even the, I would say, liberal parties, during the election campaign, they understood that this is very sensitive for ordinary people. So even the liberal parties, who in past were somehow, open to bring those migrants, suddenly before the election they said, no, we have to be very careful about this issue.
And even though there is a very little number of...
Exactly, that's very interesting. There are no refugees. People, they say we don't want Muslims here. One of the parties, I would say right-wing populist party, SPD, they say no refugees, no migrants, no Islam, and limited power of EU. But then you ask them, how many Muslims have you seen in our country? So that's very interesting. If you compare our very strong, fierce resistance with, I would say, mild resistance or discussion in such countries like France or Germany, where there are millions of those people.
Yeah, but still, you said, there is a very strong sense against the refugees, and particularly, I think, Middle Eastern refugees, because also it is the case in Turkey. When we use the term refugees, we always affiliated with the Middle East. Exactly. But you said there are many refugees from other countries as well.
And migrants. For example, that's a rather funny case. The head of the SPD party, that one anti-migrant party, he's migrant himself. He's Mr. Okamura. He's of partly Japanese origin. Okay. So a migrant is actually telling we don't want any more migrants. And by the way, Mr. Babiš, the outgoing prime minister, he's of Slovak origin. So he's another migrant coming to Prague, to Czech Republic. So
they don't the media.
What can
they don't have critique or something? There's no.
Well, of course, if you ask Mr. Okamura about it, he will say, of course, I'm not talking about responsible, hardworking migrants like me or Ukrainians or Vietnamese people. We have also tens of thousands of Vietnamese people working in our country. I'm talking about Muslims coming from Arab countries who pretend to be doctors and engineers, but then you see hundreds of thousands of them jobless in Germany and elsewhere.
So can we say that, I mean, Czech Republic is also on the same page with the other European countries in terms of refugee issue, or there are some differences between?
There are differences, of
What
course.
are they?
We can see that there is a consensus, I would say, overall European consensus, that it's a necessity to solve it somehow. Of course, if countries like Germany or Italy have to solve it because they have to absorb hundreds of thousands of those people, they have to be more responsible and they have to have a nuanced discussion about it. While we, when nobody is coming to us, we can have a very forceful, hardline statement because we don't pay for it. And we say we are not going to pay for it. You do it by yourself. The Czech government has sent a police force, for example, to Macedonia and to Balkans to prevent migration waves. Okay, we somehow participate. We contribute. We send money to Greece, to Balkan states to help them, of course, but just to some extent. Then people will tell you, why should we send money for refugees in Greece when we have so many poor Czech families over here?
So there are some internal discussions like
yes.
that.
Yes.
I see. What are the internal, by the way, domestic discussions that are dominating the, I mean, local media there? I really wonder. Currently, for example, I mean, of course, there are some elections, but other than elections.
Let's put aside elections. It's not so much, you know, now it's very hard to say because we do not have real problems. We have a very low, for example, number of people without work, jobless people, okay? Unemployment. We have some places with, I would say, social problems, but it's still limited and the state somehow knows how to deal with that. So we do not have huge ghettos, we do not have huge drug problems, crime problems. So really, we don't have anything serious. But during elections, of course, suddenly everything gets out of proportions.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And we have very little time left, Mr. Bretislav, but since you are, I think, teaching at the university right now, right? What are you teaching currently?
I teach subjects, courses related to the Middle East. I'm just somehow trying to share my experience from those countries, while my colleagues are teaching rather the theoretical part of international relations. I put this practical, everyday's life aspect to it.
You really see some prejudices against the Middle East from your students? I mean, there are some, you know, prejudices against the Middle East in general, you know, there are
Hopefully not among my students, because my courses are voluntary. There are enrolled only students who are interested in that. So I think that students who have some prejudices, who are not interested at all, they would not enroll in my courses. I would not meet them in my classroom.
I would love to join one of your classes.
Anytime
if you do online.
Come to Prague, sure.
I will. So thank you very much for joining us. It was very interesting for me.
Thanks, Feyza, for your invitation.
Thank you so much. By the way, I usually do it in the beginning, but now we will do it in the end. The name of my program is Saat Farkı, which means time difference. So what is the time difference between Prague and Istanbul?
Right now it's 1 hour.
1 hour, okay, perfect. Prague is such a beautiful city, by the way. I haven't visited yet, but hopefully I will visit. Was it your first time in Istanbul, by the way?
No, I've been in many times before. As a journalist, I spent a lot of time in Istanbul, but at Çanakkale as well, Diyarbakir and elsewhere.
Perfect. So you also visited the east part of Turkey as well, like there. Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks a lot for the invitation. Thank you. Bye bye.
Evet, Saat Farkı'nı bu hafta da böylelikle Çek Cumhuriyeti ile noktalamış olduk. Çek Cumhuriyeti'nden gazeteci, akademisyen Bretislav Turecek bizlerleydi. Avrupa Birliği'ni konuştuk, Çek Cumhuriyeti'ndeki sorunları konuştuk. Olmayan sorunları diyelim daha doğrusu, çünkü kendisi çok fazla ciddi bir sorunumuz yok dedi. Enteresan bir perspektif aldık, Çek perspektifi. Haftaya yine farklı bir konukla görüşmek dileğiyle diyoruz. Hoşçakalın.